In 1945, a group of farmhands digging for fresh fertilizer in the Egyptian desert, nearby the tombs of the 6th Egyptian royal dynasty, discovered a collection of ancient Christian writings that are now starting to change the world's understanding of ancient Christianity and the early church. They dug up several ancient Christian texts, including the Gospel of Thomas, Mary, and Philip, buried around 1,600 years ago. Now, these texts, containing many alternative views about Jesus that were not included into the Bible, many of which predate all of the New Testament, though not all of them. These texts had since been sidelined and rejected from what became Christian orthodoxy. According to Professor Helmut, he suggests that the Gospel of Thomas was written 20 years after the death of Jesus, and it in fact contains a list of uncensored sayings from the historical Jesus. Now, the story of the Nag Hammadi's discovery, according to Muhammad Ali of the Al Saman clan, he and his brothers and some others were riding their camels to Jabal al-Tarif in order to gather fertilizer. They then began to dig around a large boulder that had formed against the cliff face. They then accidentally came around a large storage jar around 6 foot in length, and it was buried by the boulder with a bowl sealed on the mouth of the jar as a lid. Apparently, the youngest brother, Abu al-Magad, initially discovered the jar, but the eldest brother, Muhammad Ali, took control of the operation. Now, Muhammad Ali told scholar James M. Robinson that he was initially scared of opening the jar out of fear of jinn, or a spirit that could cause trouble if released from the jar, though hearing stories of the ancient Egyptians burying their treasure and the thought of himself obtaining riches, this would overcome his fear. So he then smashed the jar, and something golden in colour, glistening in the sunlight, flew out of the jar and disappeared into the air, most likely fragments of a papyrus. After this, Muhammad would look inside the jar in hopes that he would find treasure, but he only found a collection of old books, to which were the codices of the Nag Hammadi library. It is thought that this story of the discovery of the Nag Hammadi was a simple tomb robbery with a made-up tale to cover up this event. Now, the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library has certainly helped historians' understanding of early Christianity and indeed Gnosticism. It is currently stored in the Coptic Museum in Cairo, Egypt, as an Egyptian national treasure. The Nag Hammadi library included 13 codices that were compiled of 52 texts, which also included a partial translation to Plato's Republic. These texts were mostly written in Coptic, but they also include Greek translations. The Nag Hammadi is a collection of texts from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries. Now, in the early 2nd century, there were attempts by the early Roman Church Fathers attempting to enforce what Gospels should be read. And it wasn't until the 4th century that copying anything but the enforced canon of the New Testament chosen by the early church was forbidden. Many early Christians, including priests, monks, and bishops, were against this, thus would bury them in secret and even being buried with them during their time of death. These early Christian manuscripts were then in turn found in their coffins. Now, a likely theory of the Nag Hammadi library is that it was taken out of a 4th century Christian monastery in Egypt, as nearby there are also ancient ruins of Christian monasteries. Because the monks that loved these texts so much, they would decide to preserve them for rediscovery in a future time, or to be able to recollect them when the persecutions would die down. The persecutions ordered by the early church fathers and by the many popes were so severe that we have lost much of the ancient knowledge of ancient Christianity, and it's thankful that we have discovered the Nag Hammadi library, as it could have easily ended up in the hands of private collectors. Now, during the time of the Nag Hammadi's burial, it was possibly buried due to the orders of the persecutions by Pope of Alexandria, Athanasius, who was the 4th Pope during the 4th century, or it could have been during the 5th century by Pope Cyril of Alexandria, though we don't actually know. Now, another theory is that these texts were somewhat of a private collection of an ancient Christian monk who decided to preserve them for later, as we have some theories of the Nag Hammadi text. So, peace and love everyone, I love you all, connect to all one, mind and soul, namaste.